welcome back to the Undead Talk podcast. Today we are going to be talking about The Walking Dead, Season 3, Episodes 7, 8, and 9, and my dad is here. Thanks for coming on.
It's good to be here. You ready?
Yeah, we're going to kind of be switching roles for today. My mouth hurts and I have a sore throat, so dad's going to be taking charge for the first and only time of this podcast.
That's great. Well, I'll try to do my very best. I know I won't be able to come anywhere near as good a job as you do. So
okay, but go ahead.
All right,
the floor is yours.
Season 3, Episode 7, When the Dead Come Knocking. Here's a little summary. The governor shows his true colors as he presses for information, and a new guest starts to stir things up at the prison. All right, so we got Glenn being tortured by Merle, which is kind of like a parallel of when Daryl was torturing Randall, which is kind of interesting. So we have within Merle and within Daryl some sort of anger that can lead to torturing. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, I wrote that down because both of the brothers have their anger issues, and they obviously both have their issues of torturing people too. So I just saw that parallel, and it just kind of ties them together even more.
Yeah, very true. Good catch. So Maggie is in a very difficult situation. She is exposed, if you would say, by the governor and almost raped. And then she, through the torture of Glenn, ends up revealing that the group is staying at the prison.
Yeah.
So Glenn and Maggie go through some pretty traumatic situations in this episode. Would you agree?
For sure. It was definitely the hard part of the episode, because I thought the episode was actually not super dramatic. This was definitely the dramatic part, though. Some really rough stuff, and I thought he was going to rape her. Just that was the direction I thought they were going. I'm glad he did not, though. Even though she had to sacrifice that information in order to keep her and Glenn safe.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have Andrea and Milton. They're together treating a dying patient named Mr. Coleman, and this is all about kind of experimenting to see if when somebody transitions to a zombie, do they remember anything from their prior life? And unfortunately, that experiment doesn't go the way that Milton hopes, and he's almost killed, but Andrea saves the day. Andrea is really shining in her time in Woodbury. Don't you agree?
Yeah, for sure. She's thriving. She's shining. She's coming into her own. She's kind of getting what she always wanted. She's getting that leadership role, and you can tell she seems happier. But I thought this whole storyline with Mr. Coleman, at first I was kind of bored by it, but now I'm kind of glad that they had it, so we can actually see that transition into becoming a walker, and we have proof that they're not their true selves. They don't remember anything.
Yeah, which kind of takes us back to season 2, and Herschel's keeping the walkers in the barn, hoping that there was a cure. Now, that's not saying there isn't a cure. I mean, I don't know how the show goes, but at this point, it looks like when someone dies, they're completely different. They no longer have any of their former life within them. All right, so Michonne is wounded, and Rick and the gang take her in, but they may remain very skeptical of her, and that kind of continues through these episodes. Don't you agree?
Yeah, the question of what is Michonne up to? Can we trust her? Can she be part of our group? And then, of course, can Tyreese and them be part of our group? There's a lot of new guests coming to the prison, was a theme in these episodes. And Michonne, showing up, it's definitely, I would be skeptical too. Just the way she shows up and she wasn't talking at all at first, and then she reveals that Merle took um, Glenn and Maggie to Woodbury, which I think that kind of made them trust her a little bit more when she revealed that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And there is this kind of back and forth between Rick and Michonne,
Hmm.
of trust and untrust, and it goes through all these episodes.
Yeah.
And that's just Rick dealing with trauma in the past. He's just not a trusting person.
No.
He's been hurt, almost killed, and it's continuing over and over again. So when he sees Michonne and when he sees Tyreese and all the others, his answer is no, right?
Hmm.
Um, how about the naming of Judith? I thought that was really cool. Rick
Hmm.
asks Carl, and Carl really just says that there was a teacher, right?
Yeah, a teacher named Judith, and he liked that name, so they decided to name him Judith.
Yeah, so Carl got to name the baby. I think that is an interesting aspect to where Carl and Rick, his dad, are at in their, kind of mindset. Rick is unable. He's
Hmm.
not able to name. He's not able to process. But Carl's, I don't know. He seems to be maturing at a scary rate. I mean, he's growing up in a way that Rick seems to be not digressing, but he's definitely turning inward. And then we have Rick, Daryl, and Michonne and Oscar facing off against a hermit inside of a cabin. I kind of thought this was a wasted scene. I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought that was kind of weird. I didn't really understand the point of it. I mean, I guess having Michonne kill him was like her way of proving her loyalty to the group. I guess, but it didn't really amount to anything from the after. Like at the end of these three episodes, I don't think her doing that changed their like view of her, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I thought even that didn't. I definitely think that was a scene that could have been taken out.
Well, it'd be interesting when we take a look at deleted scenes whether there was more to that. It felt like it was missing something to me.
Yeah, um, for sure. And then the episode ends with them like kind of arriving in Woodbury, which is a good setup for episode 8.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Now the name of the episode 7 was When the Dead Come Knocking,
Mm.
which is, one of the things we really want to do is try to kind of talk about this. There's always this threat of walkers, right? That's kind of the threat throughout. But the episode could be named as kind of the symbol of danger always knocking on their doors,
Mm-hmm.
specifically the human threats and the looming confrontation with Woodbury, but even entering in with Tyreese and the others, there's always somebody knocking on their doors.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting.
Yeah.
From a spiritual standpoint, we see this theme of resilience and faith, specifically through Glenn and Maggie's whole traumatic ordeal, and their desire to protect the group, shows their faith in their family, as their group. But also, Michonne trying to sacrifice her safety on behalf of the group to show her that she can be trusted, even
Mm-hmm.
though Rick doesn't think so or is
Yeah.
concerned. There's definitely a theme of sacrifice and redemption. Yeah. Any comments on episode 7?
Um, I would say out of these three, this is my least favorite episode. Um, but it was still solid. I my favorite part, even though it was um scary, not scary, but like uncomfortable at times, was that the Glenn and Maggie and the governor and Merle, all of that stuff. Um, and like there was like true danger with that storyline, and I was scared for Glenn, I was scared for Maggie, I was worried something would actually happen to them. um and yeah, so
Yeah, what would you give this episode?
um I mean, it was still a strong episode. I would say an 8 out of 10.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking. 8 out of
Yeah.
10.
Hmm.
There you go. All right, let's do episode 8 of season 3 called Made to Suffer. The group at the prison decides they must fight for their own as the people of Woodbury are thrown into uncharted territory.
Yes.
So we meet Tyreese and his group, Sasha, Alan, Donna, and Ben. And we see that in the opening, right? And we see that Donna gets bit.
Yeah.
So what do we think of this group? Do you like this group? What are your thoughts
I
initially?
I like I like the group. They from the graphic novels, they're all in it except I think Sasha and Ben aren't in it. But Donna and Alan are married in the comics, just like they are in the show here, and Donna dies.
Hmm.
And that kind of sends Alan into a spiral and depression. So I wonder if that's going to happen in the show or not. But yeah, I like their group. I'm curious to see more of them, especially Tyreese seems like a really good guy.
Yeah.
From what I see, I'm kind of have mixed feelings on Sasha. I don't know what the relation is to Tyreese, whether it's a girlfriend or a sister or a daughter. I don't think it's a daughter. But she seems a bit iffy to me. But I like the group. Um, I've been waiting for Tyreese to show up, so it's cool that he's finally here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to read the next graphic novel to see where that element shows. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the season of the podcast. I like Tyreese, and I think Sasha has some strong leadership capabilities.
I think so.
All right. So Donna dies after getting bit, and Carl allows them to stay until Rick gets back.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some interesting stuff. We got Axel. He's flirting with Beth, which was awkward, right?
That was very awkward.
And then, what did you think of Axel calling Carol a lesbian?
That was really funny. I laughed at that.
Stereotyping big time, short hair and all that.
Yeah.
And
it was just how like embarrassed he was after too was really funny.
Yeah. and then Carol's not interested at all.
She just walks away.
She kind of walks away. Not interested.
That was funny.
That is. And, Axel is, you have to think he's been in prison for so long and
he doesn't really know how to interact.
He doesn't know how to interact, what's appropriate,
Yeah.
Customs, that kind of stuff. So I thought that was quite interesting. I felt bad for Carol, though.
Yeah, for sure.
In that whole stereotyping thing. All right. So Rick and the group save Glenn and Maggie from the hostage situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then Daryl wants to see Merle, but Rick refuses.
Yeah. Which is it's fair. I understand both sides.
Yeah.
With Rick and Daryl. Yeah.
Well, they're family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into this a little bit later, but there's this interesting element of what will Daryl do? Where will his loyalties be? And we kind of see that moving forward. And then Michonne sneaks off and finds the governor's daughter, Penny, who's a zombie, and kills her.
Yeah, this was a pretty scary sequence. And I was like, she's gonna find her, and then she does, and then the governor comes in, and there's a big fight.
Yes, and then the governor ends up with that injury in the eye.
Yeah,
and wears the patch. But that fight was brutal, and that fight turned the governor. The governor has been brutal.
Mm-hmm.
You see, whatever was on the inside that he was hiding comes out.
Yeah,
and he is this evil leader that we saw glimpses of through the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Rick, he envisions Shane in this battle as they were leaving, which was interesting. It really shows that the whole Shane thing is still in his mind. He's still broken, dealing and processing all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we see a death. Oscar dies in that scene. And then we see, very interesting, Daryl is captured, and Daryl and Merle are forced to face off against each other, due to Merle lying to the governor way back when, right? About killing Michonne.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they face off each other, but Merle has a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Merle's, trust me, younger brother. and they escape.
Well, that's at the beginning of episode 9, but episode 8 does end off with them staring at each other, and then Andrea and Daryl, I assume, are looking at each other, and then the governor with his eye patch. And then that was like the end of like that mid season finale, which was I thought was a pretty good cliffhanger.
Absolutely,
Um,
absolutely, that was really good. That
yeah.
was really good. The name of this episode is "Made to Suffer," and suffering is a key theme throughout, of course. But the character's response to suffering really shapes and forms them. They're in a broken world and they are being broken more and
Mm-hmm.
more. So how do they respond to that suffering? And so that theme is not just in this episode, and we see
Well,
multiple aspects of.
last episode, Glenn and Maggie were suffering, so
Yeah, but in this one we see, the fight between um, Michonne and the governor, and the governor's response to that broke
mm-hmm,
him, right?
mm-hmm,
The death of Penny,
mm-hmm,
and so that response. So it's an interesting thing. And from a spiritual themes standpoint, we see suffering and compassion. The nature of suffering and how we respond to that, but also protection. There's this element of protecting your family, protecting your group. And Rick wants to protect his people. That's goes into rescue, right? But we also see Tyreese wanting to protect his people,
mm-hmm.
and so that's an interesting theme throughout. All right,
Yeah.
any thoughts on episode 8?
It was a great episode, full of action, and yeah, I really liked it. I would give it a 9.
Okay, yeah, I would give it an 8.5. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I'm really loving this show. It's been a fun
Yeah,
thing watching with you. All
for
right,
sure.
let's keep rolling here. Maybe this might even be our shortest episode
I think
in a
so.
while.
Yeah,
Here we go. That's what happens when you have a sore throat.
yeah.
You can't talk
Talk
as much.
talk less. Yeah.
All right, season 3, episode 9, the Suicide King. Rick tries to rescue a member of the group. Woodbury is in disarray after a recent attack, and new guests raise concern at the prison.
Mm-hmm,
So Merle and Daryl fight briefly, but Merle, is kind of trying to figure out a way to escape, and they
mm-hmm.
do, and they hook up with the rest of the group.
Yes. Seeing Merle with the rest of the group was something I never thought was going to happen again, but I enjoyed the dynamic, and I'm super glad that I was almost worried Merle was going to like really hurt Daryl, and then we see that he has an ulterior plan. He's breaking his ties with the governor, or I assume he is. I guess it's possible he could go back to the governor, but I don't think so.
Right, right. Um, so then we have this really interesting scene with Merle and the group,
Mm-hmm,
and what the group wants to do with Merle,
mm-hmm,
and how Rick is handling all that, and how Glenn is handling all that, and they need Daryl. Daryl's part of their family. They need Daryl,
mm-hmm.
but Daryl actually chooses Merle, and that shocks everybody. What do you think of that whole scene of Daryl and Merle in the group?
Well, I knew Daryl was going to choose Merle. He's his family. He has regret. Um, but yeah, I felt bad for Daryl and I felt bad for Rick and just that splitting of the group. And obviously, it's not going to be permanent. They're all going to come back together. Maybe not Merle. We'll see where that goes. But Daryl will definitely rejoin the group at some point. But for right now, it made sense. Like Merle, due to his personality and due to past stuff, he wasn't going to be able to join the group. At least not right now. There's just too much animosity there. I mean, Glenn literally or Merle literally tortured Glenn. So Merle is just unable to join that group. Um, so for right now, the time being, it makes sense for Daryl and Merle to just go off on their own.
So, what do you think of like Glenn? He was super ticked at Rick for letting Daryl go,
Mm-hmm.
and then Maggie trying to calm down Glenn, but Glenn goes off on her. I mean, that whole thing
Yeah.
was crazy, don't you think?
Well, yeah, and Glenn's upset that the governor tried to rape Maggie. He doesn't think any of it's okay. Maggie doesn't want him to talk about it, though. She obviously doesn't. That was very traumatic to her. She doesn't want other people knowing about that. So it kind of really sets up Glenn and Maggie's um, tension, I guess, for the season, or a new tension for them as a couple. Um, would you agree?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's going to be a lot there. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the trauma that Glenn experienced in the torture is
Mm-hmm.
changing him. And
Yeah.
getting back to the name of the episode 8, the suffering that he endured and his response to it is um, shaping him to be a different person. And he's
Mm-hmm.
lashing out like he's never lashed out before.
Yeah.
He's always been the quiet, following someone else, but he is challenging, and there's something broke inside of him as well.
Right.
Um, so the governor turns to the dark side by killing a man in front of everyone. So someone got bit,
Yeah.
and the group wants somebody to do something. And out comes the governor from his apartment and just shoots this person right there.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's just shocked. And then he just walks away.
Yep. That was interesting. I think after what happened with Penny, I think the governor, his like appearance of like being like strong and like the leader, that's kind of broken, and he's just kind of going in, like coming into his own shell, and not showing that leadership quality anymore. This is just him and his darkness and his true evil side coming out, and he's not putting up like an appearance anymore to everyone, is what I got from that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I think it's what was in on the inside is now out.
Yeah.
There is no mask or hiding. Um, it's just an
So
interesting
that's
thing.
going to create conflict with Woodbury now. And I think after the attack from last episode, it set up, there's going to be conflict within the town of Woodbury. They're obviously going to think of the governor differently from now, and maybe they're going to turn to a new person for leadership, based on what Andrea says in her little speech that she
Yeah, let's talk
gives.
about that. We don't even have funerals anymore. This is what she said. Every one of us has suffered. We're never going to be the same ever. So what do? We dig deep and find the strength to carry on. We work together and we rebuild, not just the fences, gates, and the community, but ourselves, our hearts, our minds. What do you think of that speech?
That was a very powerful speech. And even though we're probably not supposed to support it because, Andrea's on the wrong side and all of that, but it was a great speech. And very true to the show, about having to, you have to take the hits and you have to roll with it and you have to work towards a better life. And even, um, and I think Andrea, like we said earlier, she's shining in this environment. I think the writing for her character has gotten a lot better, and I think her acting has gotten a lot better. And her character has been given more layers too.
Agreed.
So I think this has been her best season, even though she's on the wrong side. But I think it makes her more interesting.
I told you she's my least favorite character,
Hmm.
right? Last season or whatever, and she's really doing. I think she's doing a great job. I think the actress is doing great. I think she's had the space to really shine here. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so there's everybody when they get back to the prison. Everybody's kind of like, "Where's Daryl?"
Hmm.
And Carol is just
Hmm.
heartbroken.
Yeah.
And she has this phrase that she says, Daryl has his code. The world needs men like that.
Hmm.
And it really just shows Carol understands the commitment that Daryl has towards family.
Hmm.
It's a deep commitment. And she admires that in him, even though he's gone and she's heartbroken about it. There is a a theme running through all of this of family. I mean, very, very obvious emphasis upon who is your family.
Mm-hmm.
For Daryl, he chose Merle,
Mm-hmm.
but for Glenn, he made that comment, "This is my family," right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is this element, and Carol recognizes that yes, this group is her family, but Daryl is a man of commitment,
Mm-hmm.
and he recognizes that commitment that he has to have towards his brother.
Right. Yeah, it was a good scene. Good line. Yeah.
And then Herschel is talking to both Glenn and Maggie, and Herschel recognizes that there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what Herschel says.
To Glenn, he says, "You're like my own son," and then to Maggie, he says, "Like, don't disappear on me." And it was funny how we were watching this, and they just like kept writing these scenes that like were just so good, and I'm like, wow, like the writing team like must have eaten cake or something.
Yeah.
Like it was like really good writing, like all back to back. With Andrea's speech, then what Carol says, then what Herschel says to both Glenn and Maggie, and that emphasis on family and yeah, I really liked it.
Yeah, I did too. We were just looked at each other and said, "Oh, we got to remember that. We got to remember that." So such good writing.
Write that down.
Write that down. That's right. And then we have Rick interacting with Tyreese and group, and Herschel's trying to convince him to include. But Rick's only mindset is exclusion for the safety of the group. And we see Rick just cracking, man. He's just falling apart, and he sees this vision of Lori.
Yeah, so vision of Shane in the previous episode, now a vision of Lori. I think that goes to show you he's not over what happened between the three of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he lost both of them.
Trauma, deep,
yeah.
deep. That's just continuing to do more and more damage and wounding of him. Not just him, but it's affecting everybody.
It's affecting everyone, and he tells Tyreese and them to get out.
Yeah. I don't know if he was necessarily talking to Tyreese.
Well, that's how
the way they
everyone
took it. Yeah.
I mean, I think a little bit, but I think he was also telling like all that trauma to get out.
Yes.
And the vision of Lori, obviously the vision of Shane, that he just wanted it gone.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's see. So the name of the episode was The Suicide King, and it traditionally refers to the King of Hearts playing card, which appears to be stabbing himself. It metaphorically represents the self-destructive actions of leaders under pressure and the high personal cost of leadership in dire times.
I mean, with Rick, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to the governor, to agree. I mean, we see that, the Suicide King. That's interesting theme through this.
Yeah, like Rick, the governor, and even Glenn a little bit are all kind of like going down self-destructive paths. Those three, for sure.
Yeah. From a spiritual theme standpoint, we definitely see the whole leadership, like we said, Rick being king and how he falls, just like the governor. We see, and we talked about family being a strong theme throughout this, but we also see kind of like that moral dilemmas. What do you do? Rick and the group letting in Tyreese. What do you do? The dilemmas. We see, that running through these episodes of tough decisions. Daryl, does he go with Merle or not? Tough decisions. So there you go. Episode 9, The Suicide King. What did you think?
This was a very strong episode, and you told me while we were watching it might be one of the best episodes that they've ever done.
Yep.
Especially just with the great writing. I would give it a 10.
Yeah, me too. I loved the family emphasis. I think that's something that we, in our own lives, we deal with. Who is our family? We have our blood relationships like Daryl and Merle has, but we have these relationships outside that can be incredibly strong, especially when they have a purpose behind them. In the case of the group, they're surviving, which is, such an amazing purpose in life. But we do too. We have our own purposes, whether that's being in church or or other groups, we have these family relationships, which can be strong and deep
Yeah.
and meaningful.
Yeah.
And this episode really reminded me that. I give it a 10 also.
Yeah.
So there we have it. Episodes 7, 8, 9 of season 3.
Yes, and we will be back next week to talk about 10, 11, and 12. So anything else you want to say?
I hope you feel better, man.
Well, thank you for taking charge for this one. Hopefully next week the roles will be back to normal.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So how did I do? Did I do okay?
You did okay.
Okay, I did okay.
You did okay.
Dad did all right. There
Okay,
you go.
so thanks everyone for listening, and bye everyone.
Bye.